The lily pads quivered under the silver ripples of the pond, and dragonflies darted like living gems through shafts of morning light. A hush lay over the enchanted marsh, where moss shimmered like emerald velvet and cattails bowed with secrets in their rustling tips. But beneath that hush, something small and determined scuttled between reeds and rocks, casting only the faintest of ripples behind him. A frog, not just any frog, but one with a tiny crown crooked atop his head, leapt from stone to stone, his golden eyes wide with worry. Behind him, the palace of lilies trembled on its watery perch. No trumpets blared, no music played, no cheering creatures lined the pond's edge. The celebration had been cancelled. Far beneath the surface, tangled in roots and magic, lay a trail of bubbles that didn't rise. The frog paused, one leg trembling mid-leap. He glanced behind him once more, as if hoping to hear a splash or a laugh. Nothing. Only the gentle drip of water from the willow branches. This was not how it was supposed to go. His brother, once a cursed prince, now gloriously restored, had married the kind and clever princess of the Meadow Kingdom. Their wedding had lit up the swamp like fireflies in spring. But now the frog prince was missing, and so was his bride. And it was up to the frog prince's brother-in-law, Tibble, the last ordinary creature in a world of enchantment, to find them. He adjusted his acorn helmet, tightened his dragonfly wing belt, and took one long breath. Then, with a hop so fierce it split the surface like a silver crack, Tibble dove headfirst into the unknown. The water closed around Tibble with a soft shush, like a curtain being drawn across a stage. Light filtered down in wavy threads, and the world turned cool and quiet. He paddled through cattail shadows and twisting roots, past sleepy minnows and gliding turtles, deeper into the place no frogs dared go. Tibble had never been special. While his brother, Lyrian, had broken the witch's curse with a kiss and become the frog prince, Tibble had stayed behind, content with pond games and dragonfly races. But now, something inside him had stirred like a storm cloud rolling over a calm sky. He had heard the whispers, creatures speaking in rustles and gulps. The prince and princess had gone into the hollow marsh before dawn to meet the moss witch and return a borrowed crown, a crown that whispered truths and dreams. They were never seen again. No one dared follow, except Tibble. A curtain of vines parted as he swam near the forgotten edge of the pond, where the water turned dark and root-tangled. A toad carved from stone marked the entrance to the hollow marsh. Its eyes were blank, but moss had grown over its frown like a sorrowful beard. Tibble swam past. The water colder now, like fingers trailing down his back. The hollow marsh was not made for sunlight. Trees grew so close together that even birds got lost. Their branches knitted the sky shut, and the air hummed with old, sleepy magic. Tibble emerged onto a mudbank, shaking off droplets, and crept forward into the gloom. The silence here felt thicker. Even the crickets dared not chirp. Ahead, strange shapes rose like melted statues. Willow stumps twisted like grasping hands, and thick fog rolled low over the ground. A flicker of something gold caught Tibble's eye, a thread of fabric snagged on a thorn. He bounced over and tugged gently. It was from the princess's wedding cloak. He was close. As he followed the fabric trail, Tibble felt the marsh watch him. The trees tilted when he wasn't looking. The fog curled tighter around his legs, but he pressed on, heart thumping. He had promised himself he would not leave without them. Then, a noise soft, like a hum through wet reeds. Tibble crouched. The humming grew louder, forming a melody that shimmered like a half-remembered lullaby. He followed the sound, past a hollow log glowing faintly blue, to a circle of toadstools as big as lily pads. In the center stood a creature made of vines and petals, her eyes like dew droplets. The moss witch. She held something in her hand, a mirror shaped like a moon slice, and in its glass danced images of the prince and princess. They were asleep, bound in green vines, their faces peaceful, their hands clasped. Tibble's breath caught. The moss witch did not seem cruel. She swayed gently, humming her song, her leafy fingers brushing over the glass. But Tibble knew magic could be tricky. It could smile while it swallowed you. He stepped into the toadstool circle, heart pounding louder than a woodpecker drum. The witch did not turn. Instead, Her vines stretched outward, twining toward Tibble like curious snakes. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his satchel and pulled out the one thing he had brought for courage, a tiny carved lily, polished smooth by years of holding it close. It had been a gift from his brother when they were tadpoles. The vines paused. Then slowly, the witch turned her gaze to Tibble. She blinked once, twice, and the humming stopped. The silence that followed was full of weight. Then the moss witch pointed to the mirror. Tibble stepped closer. In the glass, the prince and princess still slept. But now, Tibble saw the green shimmer around them. Wasn't just vine, it was song. A magical lullaby, woven of memories, dreams, and wishes. The witch had not cursed them. She had caught them mid-wish. Tibble remembered the crown, the one the princess had borrowed from the witch. A crown that whispered desires. The prince had wished for peace. The princess had wished for a moment of quiet love in a world of noise. Together, they had stepped into the spell, but it had gone too deep. The crown had caught their wishes and turned them into sleep. The witch's eyes sparkled with something like sadness. She could not undo the spell. Only someone bound by care, not crown, could bring them back. Someone whose wish was not for peace or power, but for others. Tibble looked at his little carved lily. He knew what he had to do. He knelt beside the mirror and pressed the lily to its surface. It rippled like water. Then, very softly, Tibble began to hum not the witch's song, but a tune he and Lyrian had sung long ago when they were just tadpoles floating in the moonlight. A tune of pond light and laughter. A tune of home. The glass began to glow. The vines around the prince and princess shimmered. Slowly, like petals unfolding, they began to stir. The witch tilted her head, and for the first time, her lips curled into a smile. Tibble kept humming, even as tears welled in his golden eyes. The spell tugged at him too now, pulling gently, asking if he wanted to sleep as well, to dream forever in a bubble of love and light. But Tibble shook his head. He stood. The prince and princess opened their eyes. They sat up, blinking in the soft light, and reached for each other. The vines fell away like morning mist. The mirror faded, and the witch stepped back, melting into moss and root. The toadstool circle crumbled into earth, and the fog lifted like a sigh. Tibble helped the prince to his feet. Lyrian blinked at him, confused at first, but then, with joy breaking across his face like sunlight over water, he embraced his brother. The princess touched her crown, now dull and silent, and whispered thanks not in words, but with her eyes. The hollow marsh began to brighten. Sunlight pierced the treetops. Flowers uncurled. The hush lifted. Tibble led them back the way he had come. Past the stone toad, now smiling faintly. Past the still pond, where dragonflies waited. Past the palace of lilies, where creatures now gathered once more. When they emerged, the pond burst into song. Trumpets of reed and snail shell blared. Fireflies danced. Turtles clapped their slow, steady rhythm. The celebration had returned, but this time it was not just for the prince. Tibble the frog, ordinary, brave, and loyal, had saved the kingdom not with magic, but with memory and love. And deep in the hollow marsh, the moss witch watched the pond from her mirror once more, her song now sweeter, and the crown buried beneath roots and stories, where no one would wish upon it again. Night had fallen by the time the feast began. Golden lanterns floated above the pond like tiny suns, casting ripples of light across the water. Creatures of all shapes, beetles in bow ties, ladybugs in lace, fish with pearl caps gathered on lily pads strung together with threads of silver moss. Frogs croaked in joy, and the reeds swayed with the rhythm of flutes made from snail shells. At the center of it all sat Lyrian and his bride, their hands joined, their crowns set gently beside them, quiet now. And next to them, small and uncertain, sat Tibble. A flower wreath had been placed atop his head. Frogs chattered about how he had defeated the moss witch with cleverness and courage, how he had broken a curse. Some called him a hero. Others whispered that perhaps Tibble, not Lyrian, was destined to wear a crown. But Tibble's eyes were not on the celebration. They were on the water. Even in the light and laughter, something inside him twisted like a knotted reed. His brother was safe. The princess was smiling. The marsh had returned to peace. Yet Tibble could not rest. Because the moss witch's song had not truly ended. He had heard it faint, under the cheering. A lullaby still curling at the edges of his thoughts, tugging like a breeze through leaves. And with it, a feeling that the crown's magic, though buried, was not done. He stood quietly, slipping away from the feast. No one stopped him. At the pond's edge, the moon floated in the water like a coin dropped from the sky. Tibble dipped his toe into the surface. Ripples spread, silver and soft. The witch's voice came, faint but clear now, drifting up from beneath the water. She was calling him, not with danger or threat, but with sorrow. Tibble didn't hesitate. He dove again, deeper this time, through roots and secrets and songs. Down into the old magic. The water around him turned black, then violet, then gold. He surfaced in a place that was not the pond, and not quite dream. The sky was made of woven mist. Trees floated sideways, their roots like hair. The ground shimmered like glass. And there, at the center of this strange place, sat the moss witch. But she was not made of vines now. She was a young woman with eyes of green fire and skin the color of earth after rain. She looked tired, ancient, and young all at once. Before her lay the crown, no longer whispering, but weeping. Tears of shadow and light dripped from its thorns. Tibble stepped forward. The witch lifted her gaze. Her voice came like wind through tall grass. She had once been a girl, long ago, who wore the crown to help her kingdom. It had granted every wish, spoken or hidden. But over time, it grew heavy. It began to twist desires into traps. Her people fell into endless dreams. She buried the crown and hid herself away, hoping time would forget. But time remembered. And now the crown had awakened again. It had tasted the prince's wish, the princess's dream, and it wanted more. Unless someone stopped it, Tibble felt the pull of it stronger than before. His own secret wish, long buried, rose like a bubble. He had always wanted to be seen, not as the quiet brother, not as the silly one, but as someone important, someone who mattered. The crown shimmered. It heard. Tibble's breath hitched. He stepped closer. Just one step. The crown glowed brighter. The witch's eyes widened, not in anger, but in fear. She spoke again, her voice trembling. If Tibble touched the crown with that wish in his heart, it would bind him, not as a king but as its keeper. The dream would become endless. He would be loved by all, forever, but alone. The temptation swirled like fog. Tibble saw it, saw himself atop a golden lily, all creatures cheering, his name sung across the pond. Never forgotten, always important. His heart ached. Then he saw his brother, Lyrian, laughing. The princess clapping with delight. The pond glowing with joy. None of that had come from a crown. It had come from choosing love, not longing. Tibble closed his eyes, and he whispered his true wish, to keep others from falling where he almost had. He reached down, not to wear the crown, but to wrap it in his carved lily, the one polished smooth by hope and memory. As the wood touched the metal, the glow dimmed. The crown stilled. A silence fell, so deep and full it rang like a bell. Then the dream sky cracked open. Light poured in. The witch smiled. She was fading, her body dissolving into petals and mist. Her final words fluttered through the light. The spell is broken, because you chose not to wish for yourself. Tibble was falling, rising, both at once. He landed softly on the pond's edge. The sun was rising. He held the crown, now dull and quiet, wrapped tight in the carved lily. His brother came running, eyes wide with relief. The princess followed, lifting her skirts from the dewy grass. Tibble stood, tired but steady. He gave them the crown, then shook his head, not to wear, but to bury it, deep beneath the roots of the willow tree, where no magic could reach again. Lyrian nodded. Together, they did. The ground closed like a sigh. Tibble turned toward the pond. The water reflected him clearly now, not as a shadow of his brother, but as himself, small, brave, ordinary, and full of light. Morning bathed the pond in a soft golden light. The lilies opened their white petals as if yawning. Dewdrops sparkled like stars caught in mid-fall. The music from the celebration had faded, replaced by the gentle sounds of nature, the rustle of reeds, the flutter of dragonfly wings, and the occasional distant croak echoing with peace. Tibble sat at the edge of the water, legs dangling into the cool shallows. For the first time, in a long time, he wasn't thinking of what others saw when they looked at him. He wasn't wondering if he mattered. He wasn't waiting to be noticed. He simply sat, still, quiet, content. Behind him, the pond kingdom was waking. Creatures stretched, stirred, and whispered of the strange night. Some spoke of the moss witch. Others spoke of dreams and songs and the vanishing of the crown. But most spoke of Tibble, the little frog who had followed no command, who had worn no crown, yet had saved them all. Lyrian stepped beside him, his royal cloak now simple again. His crown lay on a lily pad, untouched. The princess stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, her eyes on the sun rising through the reeds. Tibble didn't turn. He just smiled at the sound of their steps, at the warmth behind him. He didn't need praise. What he had needed, he had already found in the song he sang for his brother, in the choice he made when no one was watching, in the quiet bravery of stepping forward not to shine, but to protect. Still, Lyrian lowered himself beside Tibble and offered something. It was the little carved lily now faintly glowing with gold at its heart. The crown had left a trace behind, but not a dangerous one. A memory, a light, gentle, and true. Tibble held it in his webbed hands. It felt the same as before, but somehow more complete. Not magical, just meaningful. He tucked it into his satchel, where it had always belonged. Then, to Tibble's surprise, Lyrian stood and turned toward the gathering creatures. His voice rose not in command, but in story. He told them what Tibble had done, not just diving into the hollow marsh or confronting the moss witch, but choosing not to take the crown, choosing to give up his deepest wish so that others might be free. There was no cheering at first, only silence. Then a ripple of nods, slow, solemn. Even the turtles bowed their heavy heads. Then a cheer, soft as a breeze, bloomed and grew. It rolled through the pond like a wave. Creatures clapped wings and shells and paws. Fireflies lit the air in bursts of green and yellow. The lilies pulsed as if sighing in relief. But Tibble didn't rise to take a bow. He only stood and looked around. The sky was clear. The water sparkled. The danger was gone. And yet, something remained. Not a threat, but a promise. The pond was safe now, yes. But there were other places, other marshes, other enchanted corners, where magic stirred and wishes whispered. Not all stories ended as gently as this one. Tibble turned to his brother, to the princess, to the crowd. Then he took off the flower wreath from his head and placed it on the water. It floated gently away, and he began to walk. Not away, but forward. Not to leave, but to see. Because somewhere, someone else might be waiting. Waiting for a friend, a helper. A brave little frog who didn't want to be a hero, but would become one if needed. Lyrian didn't stop him, nor did the princess. They knew this was who Tibble had always been. Not someone seeking a throne, but someone following his heart. He passed the willow tree, where the crown lay hidden beneath the roots. He paused, touched the bark gently, then moved on. Past the dragonfly nests. Past the stone toad, now with moss blooming brightly around its smile. Into the reeds, where the light danced and the air smelled like new rain. As he walked, he heard the softest sound behind him. A child frog small, curious, had followed him. Then another, and another. Not many, just enough. They didn't ask questions. They just hopped along, curious and brave in their own small way. Tibble glanced back. He smiled and kept walking. The pond faded behind him. but its song stayed in the air. A lullaby not of sleep but of courage. A song that would be sung for years to come, of Tibble, the Frog Prince's brother-in-law, who didn't lift a sword or wear a crown, but who stepped forward when no one else would, who listened when others wished, and who chose to protect, not to rule. His tale would drift across lily pads and ripple through marshes, not as a tale of grand magic, but of quiet strength. And the children who followed him, they would learn that bravery often wears small feet, and that even the gentlest heart can hold the mightiest song. The sun rose higher, the reeds shimmered gold, and in that light, a little frog walked into legend.